We're going to begin our discussion on writing this semester by looking closely at the process behind writing, so that you can take on the complex tasks that will be assigned throughout the semester effectively, efficiently, and confidently. Okay? If you set a goal this week to explore and begin to strategize about your own writing process, you'll give yourself a solid foundation for going forward. All right? Now, because of who I am and my own experience, both as a teacher, but also my point of view as a writer, um, I'm going to shape this discussion and lead us first to focus not on writing specifically, but on reading. We're going to do this because I believe a discussion about reading leads to important insights that are necessary for us to grow as writers. Okay, so first we want to look at what exactly happens when we read something. All right, certainly we acquire information and knowledge. This is what we do when we hop on YouTube, when we have to change a light bulb in an apparatus that we're not familiar with, or change the oil in our car, or learn something about the world around us. We also glean vocabulary and perspective. Essentially, this is what you're doing as a student in a biology class, in a sociology class. You're gaining words that open up the world and help you to see things that you otherwise couldn't identify. Also, of course, when we read, we find ways to escape, to light our brains on fire. Okay? But how exactly does this work? What is it about language that sucks us in so much that we stop seeing words on the page and we start to see whole vistas? We start to smell atmosphere. What allows us to see these new worlds? What is it about language that allows someone hundreds of years ago to communicate to us living today? Okay. What is it about writing that lets you know sort of what it's like to have climbed Mount Everest when you've never experienced yourself, but somehow reading about it allows you to viscerally and virtually go through that experience that someone else has had? And most interestingly, what is it about written language that puts inside of you a desire to vote, a desire to act in a way that wasn't there before you had read that piece? So how is it exactly that writing affects us? Can we blame the words themselves, the style of them, the appeal? Is it the writer's fault? Or is it us? Is it the audience themselves? When we are reading, do we give the language permission to persuade us, to cause us to see something? Or is it both? Is it the choices that the writer has made with the choices that the audience is making that allows for this visceral experience of one person's imagination and another's? Really, these questions frame the discussion that we're going to have this semester. But most important for where we are right now, this is where we see an interesting intersection between the reading of language and the writing of language. So this might be a good place just to pause the video, get out a piece of paper, and jot down a few notes, because I think where we're going next is going to give you a context that will be useful for the work you're going to do this week. Okay. So first, if you're aware of what's going on while you're reading, you will begin to identify models of how writing works, of good writing or even bad writing. So if you read actively, in other words, if you annotate, circle things that are interesting to you, underline phrases that are especially precise, put question marks next to language that's garbled or obscure, you'll begin to take note of, as a writer yourself, what you value, what you don't value, what's challenging to you, and what you're already very good at. Okay? So in this sense, this is a kind of reading that's paying attention to the form of what you're reading, to the form of writing, how it's structured, how it's written, and why that's effective in communicating an idea. Another way to read is to take from the writing not so much the form, but the content, the ideas that are in that piece, because those ideas can help build what you are planning to write about, what you need to argue. Okay, so this is having a thesis already in mind for a paper that you're writing, and then doing some research or engaging some reading with your thesis as a priority, and looking for the passages, the ideas, the questions that will make your thesis deeper, that will give it support, that will push it forward. Okay, this is the messy side of writing, right? But this is critical. This is you not writing in your own subjective position, but taking other people's voices to build your work as well. All right, and so it's reading in both of these ways: reading, paying attention to the form of written language, and reading by paying attention to the content of reading of written language. In these two ways, an act of reading will support you as a writer. Another way to say this is that reading is a critical part of the writing process, and this is really where we want to go next. What you do when you read will bleed into what you do when you begin writing an essay. And starting with a good sense of how you read things will allow you to start with a healthy process for writing complicated tasks. If you try to tackle these things just by simply sitting down and going for it, you may find this an uninteresting process, a very difficult thing to do. If, on the other hand, you build your process, you build this essay piece by piece by, say, starting out annotating, jumping over to some free write, doing a little research, having a discussion with somebody, blind writing, which is typing with the monitor off, just so you don't see all your mistakes. If you do this piece by piece, chunk by chunk, you might find that a very complex essay becomes accessible. So the point is, in my class, I want you to think of the writing process, whatever that is to you at this point. I want you to imagine it as a bridge. And I want you to think of yourself at one point, you're given a 10-page paper assignment, and you either don't care about that paper, or you simply have no clue as to where to start. Quite a ways away from you is this essay, this thing that your professor has asked you to write, and you have to submit to pass this class and to move forward. If you simply look at this situation with this gaping span between you, it can be intimidating and frustrating. On the other hand, if you develop a process, a step-by-step, I know if I do this first, and I do this next, and I do this thirdly, I can slowly move forward from where I am, not caring, not having a clue, into interest, clarity, and finally the essay I have to produce. This week we're introducing the Common Book, which is one place to begin this sort of process for yourself. Okay, but it's important to know that this is what all writers do. Okay, whether they admit to it or not, every writer has a process. Your writing process is the topic for this week's activities and discussions. When you're reading and when you start to write something, you should start to feel comfortable, start to lay out for yourself how you can make a mess of observations. Similarly to what we do on the beach when we want to build a sandcastle. You can't start building a castle until you first have this massive, messy pile. Okay? Once you have it, you can begin to pat it down, to wipe away stuff you don't need, and to give shape. Okay? So in this way, you're going to start writing an essay. You're going to do it by starting a mess, but this mess is going to give you clarity, it's going to give you interest, and it's going to give you confidence about what to do and how to go about writing something.